The jet bridge smelled like burned coffee and floor cleaner, a sterile breath after hours in recycled air. Captain Marcus Reed adjusted the strap of his worn leather flight bag and waited his turn to exit, uniform jacket folded over his arm, wings pinned neatly to his chest. He felt the familiar relief of solid ground, and then the weight of eyes. "Sir, hold up." The voice cut through the low murmur of passengers. Marcus turned. A police officer stood at the end of the gate, one hand resting on his belt, the other already lifting in a stopping gesture. The officer's gaze slid past Marcus's epaulets, past the airline insignia, settling instead on his face. "You need to come with me," the officer said. No greeting, no explanation. Marcus glanced around. Other passengers flowed past, eyes flicking away when they noticed the pause. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked, keeping his voice level. The officer smirked. "We got a call. Suspicious behavior in the cockpit area. You fit the description." A quiet laugh escaped someone behind Marcus. The sound burned. "I'm the pilot," Marcus said, lifting his badge slightly. The officer didn't look. "Yeah. Then you won't mind a few questions." The grip on Marcus's arm was firm, possessive. Cameras came out. Phones tilted. No one intervened. As he was steered away from the gate, Marcus caught his reflection in the darkened window. A black man in a pilot's uniform, being marched like a suspect. His phone vibrated once inside his pocket. Unknown number. Stand by. Do not escalate. Marcus swallowed. Because suddenly, this wasn't just an airport anymore, and whatever was coming next was already out of his control. Marcus Reed had learned long ago how to stand still. In turbulence. In briefings that went quiet when he entered. In rooms where waiting was a test disguised as protocol. So when the officer's hand closed around his arm, Marcus didn't pull away. He adjusted his stance, feet shoulder-width apart, weight balanced, breath controlled. "Sir, you're detaining me?" Marcus asked. Officer Daniel Hargreaves' smile was thin. "I'm asking you to step aside. That's a yes or no question." Hargreave leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The jet bridge emptied behind them. A woman slowed, phone raised. A man whispered. What did he do? No one asked Marcus. He felt the heat rise in his neck but kept his tone neutral. "I'm Captain Reed. Delta Flight 482. My ID is visible." Hargreave glanced at the wings on Marcus's chest like they were decorative. Uniforms don't mean much these days. Marcus exhaled slowly. He had heard that sentence before, in different forms in different cities. It always meant the same thing. "Step over here," Hargreave said, guiding him toward a blank stretch of wall. The pressure on Marcus's arm tightened just enough to be felt, not enough to be obvious on camera. "Am I under arrest?" Marcus asked again. "You are being temporarily detained for questioning." "For what reason?" "Suspicious access patterns reported by airport staff." Marcus almost smiled. "Almost. I fly the aircraft," he said. "Access is my job." Hargreaves' eyes hardened. "Funny." Another officer approached, younger, uncertain. "Everything okay, Dan?" "Yeah," Hargreaves said. "Just doing our due diligence." The younger officer looked at Marcus's uniform, hesitated, then looked away. "Let me know if you need backup." Marcus watched him leave. That was how it worked. No malice required. Just movement away. "Hands where I can see them," Hargreaves said. Marcus complied, lifting them slowly. He was aware of every camera now. Of how his posture would be read. Of how quickly dignity could be edited into defiance. "I'd like a supervisor present," Marcus said. "You don't get to make requests right now." A memory flashed. Another corridor, another uniform, another authority. He pushed it down. "Sir," Marcus said carefully, "this is unnecessary." Hargreave chuckled. "You'd be surprised what's necessary." The words landed heavy. Marcus felt the old instinct rise, the one trained into him by years of command, to take control, to correct the situation. He didn't. He stood still. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. Hargreave noticed. You expecting someone? Marcus met his eyes. I always am. The officer's smile faded. You think you're special? Marcus said nothing. Hargreave turned him toward the hallway leading away from the gate. We're going to secondary screening. On whose authority? Mine. As they walked, Marcus caught sight of the departure board. His flight number still blinked arrived in calm white letters. The world moving on intact. Behind him a voice called out, Hey, is that the pilot? No answer came. Marcus crossed the threshold into the secured corridor, the door closing with a soft, final click. The door shut behind Marcus with a dull, padded thud. Too soft for a place meant to decide things. The room was smaller than he expected. No windows. A metal table bolted to the floor. 3 chairs, one already pulled back like it had been waiting. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, not loud enough to notice at first, but persistent once you did. The kind of sound that crawled under your thoughts. Sit, Officer Hargreave said. Marcus took the chair without hesitation, placing his flight bag carefully at his feet. He kept his jacket folded on his lap, wings still visible. He knew better than to remove them. Symbols mattered, even when they were ignored. Hargreave didn't sit. He circled once, slow, assessing, like the pause before a question that wasn't really a question. You fly commercial, Hargreave said. Yes. How long? 14 years. Military before that. Marcus paused. Yes. Hargreave's eyebrows lifted slightly. Figures. Marcus looked up. Why? Hargreave shrugged. Discipline. Bearing. You guys always have that, look. The words were casual, almost complimentary. Marcus heard the subtext anyway. A second officer entered, airport security. Badge clip. Tablet in hand. She nodded at Hargreave, then at Marcus, professional but distant. We got a report, she said. Unscheduled movement in the cockpit after landing. A staff member flagged it. Marcus leaned back slightly. After landing, I ran post-flight checks. As required. That's logged. We'll see, she replied, tapping her screen. Hargreave finally sat, elbows on the table. Let's start simple. Where were you born? Marcus blinked. That's not relevant. Humor me. Baltimore. Parents. My parents are not relevant either. Hargreave smiled. Everything's relevant when we're assessing risk. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. Risk of what exactly? Don't get defensive. I'm answering questions, Marcus said evenly. I'd like to know the basis for them. The airport officer cleared her throat. Captain Reed, this will go faster if you cooperate. I am cooperating. Hargreave slid a printed sheet across the table. Flight logs. Highlighted lines. Dates circled in red. You've had an unusual number of international routes, he said. Middle East, Eastern Europe, Asia Pacific. That's normal for long-haul captains. Not all of them. Marcus looked at the paper then back up. Are you suggesting something? Hargreave leaned back. I'm asking questions. Then ask them clearly. The officer's jaw tightened. What were you doing in the cockpit for 12 minutes after all passengers had disembarked? Marcus didn't hesitate. Securing encrypted flight data. The airport officer paused mid-scroll. Encrypted? Yes. Hargreave's eyes sharpened. Commercial flights don't use. They do, Marcus interrupted calmly. When required. Silence followed. Not confusion. Calculation. Hargreave folded his arms. You want to explain that? I can't, Marcus said. The airport officer frowned. You can't. I'm not authorized to. Hargreave laughed quietly. That's convenient. Marcus felt the shift then, the moment curiosity turned into justification. Let me get this straight, Hargreave said. You expect us to believe you were doing classified work on a commercial jet, and we're just supposed to nod? Marcus held his gaze. I expect you to follow protocol. That's rich. The door opened again. A supervisor stepped in, Lieutenant Perez. Older, tired eyes. He took in the scene in one sweep. What do we have? Perez asked. Pilot refusing to explain suspicious activity, Hargreaves said quickly. Marcus spoke at the same time. I've explained everything I'm permitted to explain. Perez raised a hand. One at a time. He turned to Marcus. Captain Reed, is there a reason this can't be resolved quickly? Yes, Marcus said. Because I'm being treated as a suspect without cause. Perez sighed. Officer Hargreave. Red flags, Hargreaves said. Background. Travel. Evasive answers. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Sir, with respect, my answers are not evasive. They are constrained. Perez studied him for a moment. Constrained by what? Marcus hesitated. Not because he didn't know, but because he did. Federal obligation, he said carefully. The room stilled. Perez glanced at Hargreave. Did you run his credentials? Working on it. You should have done that first. Hargreave bristled. We received a report. Perez nodded slowly. And we verify before we escalate. He turned back to Marcus. Are you currently carrying any restricted materials? No. Any weapons? No. Perez exhaled. Then we slow this down. Hargreave opened his mouth. Perez cut him off. Dan. The silence that followed was heavy, but not relief. Marcus recognized this too. The system-correcting tone, not harm. Perez gestured to the airport officer. Step outside. She hesitated, then left. Perez lowered his voice. Captain Reed, between us, are you affiliated with any federal agency beyond the FAA? Marcus didn't answer. Perez nodded once. That's enough of an answer. Hargreave scoffed. So we just let him go? No, Perez said. We document. Carefully. Marcus's phone buzzed again. Once, then twice. Perez noticed. You expecting a call? Yes. Perez hesitated, then nodded. You can take it. Speaker. Marcus removed the phone slowly. Captain Reed, a calm voice said. This is Colonel Hayes. Pentagon liaison. Hargreave went still. Perez straightened. We are aware of the situation, the voice continued. Remain where you are. Do not disclose. We are coordinating. Yes, sir, Marcus said. The call ended. No one spoke for several seconds. Hargreave swallowed. Pentagon. Marcus met his eyes. Not triumph, not anger. Just exhaustion. Perez cleared his throat. Officer Hargreave, step outside. Now. As the door closed behind him, Marcus finally let his shoulders drop. Just a fraction. The room still hummed. And he knew this wasn't over. The room felt smaller after the call ended. Not physically. Nothing had changed in the dimensions, but the air had shifted, thickened like pressure before a storm. Marcus rested his phone on the table, screen dark now. His reflection faint against the glass. Colonel Hayes's voice still echoed in his ears. Calm, precise, utterly unconcerned with comfort. Remain where you are. Do not disclose. Lieutenant Perez cleared his throat. Captain Reed, he said carefully. I'm going to need to make a few calls. Marcus nodded. I understand. Perez stood, hesitated, then lowered his voice. For what it's worth. I don't think this should have gone this far. Marcus didn't answer. He had learned that apologies offered without accountability were just another way to close a file. Perez stepped out. The door clicked shut, leaving Marcus alone again. The hum of the lights grew louder. He flexed his fingers once, slowly, grounding himself. This wasn't his first windowless room. It wasn't even his worst. Still, the weight of this one pressed differently because of the cameras outside, because of the phones, because of the story already forming without him. He thought of his mother years ago, standing at the kitchen counter in Baltimore, watching the news while she cooked. Always watching. Always quiet when stories like this came on. Don't argue, she used to say. Don't give them a reason. Marcus had followed that advice his whole life. Perfect grades. Perfect posture. Perfect record. And still. The door opened again. Not Perez this time. Hargreaves stepped in, jaw tight, eyes sharp with something close to panic but not quite fear yet. He closed the door behind him with more force than necessary. You didn't tell us, Hargreaves said. Marcus looked up. You didn't ask the right questions. Pentagon, Hargreaves snapped. You expect me to believe you're some kind of what spy? Marcus's voice stayed level. I expect you to follow procedure. Hargreaves laughed, but it cracked in the middle. You think a phone call changes what happened out there? You think that erases suspicion? It doesn't need to, Marcus said. Facts do that on their own. Hargreaves leaned over the table, lowering his voice. You know how this looks, right? You stonewall. You hide behind titles. People with something to hide do that. Marcus met his eyes. People with something to protect do too. For a moment, Hargreaves said nothing. Then quieter. What do you actually do? Marcus considered the question. He could give 100 answers. Pilot. Officer. Strategist. And he chose none of them. I serve, he said. Hargreaves scoffed. That's vague. That's intentional. The door opened again, this time without warning. 2 men entered, both in suits. No badges visible. Their presence shifted the room immediately. Authority without announcement. Captain Marcus Reed, the taller one said. I'm David Lynn. This is Angela Morris. We're with the Department of Defense. Hargreaves straightened. You can't just. Lynn cut him off with a glance. We can. Morris looked at Marcus, her expression unreadable but not hostile. Sir, thank you for your patience. Marcus inclined his head slightly. Ma'am. Lynn turned to Hargreaves. We'll need the room. Hargreaves bristled. This is an active. Not anymore, Morris said. You'll be briefed later. Hargreaves looked at Marcus one last time, something like resentment flickering across his face. This isn't over. Marcus didn't respond. The door closed behind Hargreaves. Silence followed, but a different kind now. Purposeful. Lynn sat. Morris remained standing. Captain Reed, Lynn said. I'll be direct. The incident at the gate is already circulating. Marcus nodded. I assumed as much. A video's trending, Morris added. Edited. No audio from before the detention. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. That was how it always went. Context stripped. Control reassigned. Lynn leaned forward. We need to know if you intend to disclose your secondary role. No, Marcus said immediately. Morris tilted her head. Even if it clears you. Yes. Lynn exchanged a look with her. You understand the personal cost of that choice. I do, Marcus said. I've lived it. Silence stretched. Morris finally spoke. For the record, your post-flight activity was authorized. I know. We've confirmed it, she said. Formally. Marcus exhaled slowly, the tension easing just enough to feel the ache underneath. Lynn continued. Lieutenant Perez has been instructed to de-escalate. You will be released shortly. And Officer Hargreaves? Marcus asked. That's complicated, Morris said. Marcus looked up at her. It always is. Lynn sighed. Captain, off the record. This shouldn't have happened. Marcus's mouth tightened. It did. Morris softened just a fraction. How are you holding up? The question caught him off guard. He considered lying. He didn't. I'm tired, he said. Morris nodded. That tracks. Lynn stood. We'll stay on site until you're cleared. Marcus rose as well, smoothing his jacket. I appreciate the intervention. Morris met his eyes. We shouldn't have to intervene at all. The door opened again. Perez stood there, face carefully neutral. Captain Reed, he said. You're free to go. Marcus picked up his flight bag. As he stepped into the hallway, the sounds of the airport rushed back in. Announcements, rolling luggage, distant laughter. Life resuming. Perez walked beside him. I want you to know, we're reviewing procedures. Marcus stopped, turned to him. Lieutenant, he said quietly, procedures didn't stop me. People did. Perez swallowed. Understood. Marcus walked on. Behind him somewhere phones were still recording. Stories still forming. But for the first time since the gate, Marcus felt the shift. Not toward justice yet, but toward exposure. And once light hit this, it wouldn't stay contained. By morning, Marcus Reed no longer belonged to himself. The video had spread sometime between midnight and dawn, carried by insomnia and outrage, pushed by algorithms that thrived on unfinished stories. It opened with him standing at the gate in his pilot's uniform, Officer Hargreaves' hand firm on his arm. No sound at first, just the image. Black man stopped. A white officer unmoved. Then the captions appeared. Uncooperative pilot detained at airport. Security incident raises questions. Marcus watched it once, then set his phone face down on the kitchen table. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, the jet bridge lights flickered back into place. His phone buzzed again. Airline operations. He answered. This is Captain Reed. Marcus, a familiar voice said. Linda Shaw, Regional Director. Controlled. Careful. We need to talk. I figured. There was a pause. You've seen the footage. Yes. We're placing you on administrative leave. Effective immediately. Marcus closed his eyes. For how long? Until we complete an internal review. Review of what? He asked. I wasn't charged. It's precautionary, Linda said. Standard. Marcus leaned against the counter. Standard for whom? She didn't answer directly. This is about optics. Optics, he repeated. Marcus, she said softly. You know how this works. He did. The airline didn't need guilt. Just distance. I'll need your badge and credentials returned by end of day. Of course, Marcus said. Anything else? Another pause. We're advising you not to make public statements. Marcus almost laughed. Almost. I haven't. Good, Linda said, relieved. Let's keep it that way. The call ended. Marcus stood there for a long moment, phone still in his hand. The uniform hanging by the door suddenly felt heavier than it had the night before. He thought of the passengers who had trusted him, of the thousands of hours logged without incident. All of it reduced to a clip. By noon, the narrative had hardened. A former classmate texted, Man, what happened? Cousin sent a link with no message. A stranger wrote, If you didn't do anything wrong, why won't you explain yourself? Marcus didn't respond. He watched the comments scroll by, each one further from the truth than the last. Some defended him. Many didn't. He looks guilty. Why was he in the cockpit after landing? Rules apply to everyone. That one stayed with him. Rules apply to everyone. His phone rang again. Unknown number. This is Captain Reed. Marcus, it's Angela Morris, the voice said. I wanted to check in. I'm on leave, Marcus said. The airline? Yes, Angela replied. We anticipated that. Of course you did. There was a beat. We're tracking the coverage. We're pushing back where we can. And where you can't. Angela sighed. That's the system. Marcus sat at the table. Officer Hargreave. He's been placed on desk duty pending review. Marcus waited. And he's given an interview. Marcus felt the air leave his chest. An interview. He claims he followed protocol, Angela said carefully. Says you were evasive. Marcus closed his eyes. He could picture it. Measured concern, vague language. The performance of reason. Is the Pentagon responding? Marcus asked. Not publicly. Why? Because your assignment is classified, Angela said. And because once we speak, we can't control how far it goes. Marcus laughed, sharp and humorless. You don't control it now. I know, she said quietly. That afternoon, Marcus stepped outside for the first time since returning home. The city moved around him like nothing had changed. A woman jogged past. Delivery truck honked. Somewhere, a plane roared overhead, climbing into clean air. He looked up instinctively. A reporter recognized him first. Captain Reed, she called, already raising her camera. Can you tell us what happened at the airport? Marcus stopped. The sidewalk seemed to narrow. I have nothing to add, he said. Were you detained because of your race? Another voice shouted. Do you feel betrayed by your airline? Is it true the Pentagon intervened? Marcus said nothing. He walked on, heart pounding, each step an act of will. By evening, a new headline replaced the old ones. Airline suspends pilot after security incident. The implication was clear. If he were innocent, he'd still be flying. Marcus sat on his couch, lights off, watching his reflection in the dark window. He thought of the younger officer who had looked away. Of Perez's tired eyes. Of Hargreaves' certainty. The phone buzzed again. Angela. They're calling for a congressional review, she said. Airport policing. Racial profiling. Marcus straightened. Because of this? Yes. Good, Marcus said. It means pressure, Angela warned. On everyone. Including you. Marcus looked at the uniform by the door. I've been under pressure my whole life. There was silence on the line. Marcus, Angela said finally, if this goes public, everything it will cost you. He nodded, even though she couldn't see it. It already has. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Somewhere a committee was forming. Somewhere else, Officer Hargreave was rehearsing his answers. Marcus sat in the dark, the weight of the story pressing in. This was no longer about a gate. It was a record now. And records had a way of outliving the people who made them. The building had no sign. That was the first thing Marcus noticed as he stood across the street, hands in his coat pockets, watching people pass without looking up. No seal. No flag. Just tinted glass and a security camera that didn't blink. Power preferred to be anonymous. He crossed when the light changed. Inside, the air was cooler, quieter. A receptionist glanced up, checked his name, and nodded once. No smile. No suspicion either. Just efficiency. Conference room C, she said. They're waiting. They always were. Angela Morris was already seated when Marcus entered, a legal pad in front of her, pen resting perfectly parallel to the edge. David Lynn stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low tones. Two other people sat at the table. Both lawyers, both unfamiliar. Marcus closed the door behind him. Captain Reed, Angela said, standing. Thank you for coming. Didn't feel optional, Marcus replied. One of the lawyers smiled thinly. Very perceptive. They introduced themselves quickly. Names Marcus would forget on purpose. Titles that blurred together. Counsel, advisor, liaison. Lynn ended his call and joined them. Let's get started, Lynn said. Time matters. Marcus sat. A folder slid across the table toward him. Inside were screenshots, tweets, headlines, stills from the video. Each one annotated. Each one dissected. This is the public narrative, Lynn said. It's metastasizing. Angela leaned forward. Internal reviews have begun at the airport authority, the police department, and your airline. And? Marcus asked. And they're moving slowly, she said. On purpose, Marcus replied. No one disagreed. The first lawyer spoke. Officer Hargreave has retained counsel. Marcus's jaw tightened. Already? Yes, the lawyer said. And he's framing this as a good faith stop. Good faith, Marcus repeated quietly. He claims you were evasive, non-compliant, and dismissive of authority. Marcus let out a breath. I answered every lawful question. Angela nodded. We know. But the record doesn't show everything, Lynn said. And that's the problem. Marcus leaned back, crossing his arms. So what's the plan? The room fell quiet. That told him everything. Angela spoke carefully. There are two paths forward. Let me guess, Marcus said. Silence or sacrifice? Angela winced. Disclosure or containment? Marcus looked at her. Same thing. Lynn opened another folder. This one thinner. If you authorize limited disclosure of your Pentagon role, we can reframe the incident. Not fully. Just enough to establish legitimacy. Marcus shook his head immediately. No. Marcus, Lynn said. This could end it. It won't, Marcus replied. It'll shift it. Angela studied him. Explain. They won't see a professional wronged, Marcus said. They'll see an exception. An excuse. Oh, he's special, so this makes sense. And the next guy won't be. Silence followed. Heavy. Respectful. Uncomfortable. You're asking to carry this alone, the second lawyer said. I already am, Marcus replied. Angela spoke softly. What about you, Marcus? How are you holding up? The question landed harder than she meant it to. Marcus looked down at his hands. He hadn't noticed the tremor until now. I'm not sleeping, he said. I replay everything. Wonder if one different word would have changed it. Angela's jaw tightened. That's not on you. I know, Marcus said. Doesn't stop my brain. Lynn glanced at his watch. We need to decide next steps. Marcus stood. I need air. Outside, the city pressed in again. Traffic, voices, life continuing. Marcus walked without direction, letting the noise drown out his thoughts. He passed a newsstand. His face stared back at him from a tablet screen. Pilot's silence raises questions. He laughed under his breath. Silence was always suspicious when it came from people like him. His phone buzzed. His sister. He hesitated, then answered. Hey, Marcus, she said, voice tight. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know what to tell, he replied. They suspended you, she said. Mama saw it on the news. Marcus closed his eyes. I'll call her. She's scared, his sister said. She thinks they're going to ruin you. They might, Marcus said honestly. Oz, are you okay? He leaned against a brick wall. I don't know. That night, sleep came in fragments. Faces, lights, the sound of the jet bridge door closing. He woke before dawn, heart racing, sheets tangled. 7, Angela called. There's a development, she said. Marcus sat up. Go on. The Congressional Subcommittee is requesting testimony, she said. From you. Marcus stared at the wall. Public. Yes. When? 2 weeks. Marcus exhaled slowly. And if I refuse? Angela didn't answer immediately. Then others will speak for you. He nodded. That's worse. There's more, she said. Your airline has indicated they'll wait for the hearing before reinstating you. Marcus smiled grimly. Convenient. They're hedging, Angela said. They want cover. Everyone does, Marcus replied. He stood, pulling on his jacket. Outside, the sky was just beginning to lighten, the city caught between night and day. Angela, he said, if I testify. Yes. I do it on my terms. She didn't hesitate. Understood. The call ended. Marcus stepped onto his balcony, the cold air sharp in his lungs. Somewhere above him, another plane cut across the sky, steady and sure. He watched until it disappeared. Closed doors had kept him contained for days. Soon he realized they would open. Not because the system wanted them to, but because it had underestimated how much pressure one man could withstand before becoming impossible to ignore. The hearing room smelled like old paper and polished wood, a place designed to look timeless so no one could accuse it of being outdated. Marcus sat at the witness table, hands folded, back straight. The room was already filling, staffers murmuring, journalists setting up cameras, aides whispering into phones. Every movement felt amplified, every sound a reminder that this was no longer private, no longer containable. Angela Morris sat behind him, just off to the side. She caught his eye and gave a small nod. Not reassurance, confirmation. Across the room, Officer Daniel Hargreave entered with his attorney. He wore a dark suit that didn't quite fit his shoulders, his badge absent, his posture stiff with practiced humility. He didn't look at Marcus. Not once. "Mr. Reed," a staffer said quietly, "we'll begin shortly." Marcus nodded. As the subcommittee members took their seats, the room settled into a tense hush. Cameras clicked. The red recording light blinked on. "This hearing of the Subcommittee on Transportation Security and Civil Rights will come to order," the chairwoman said. Her voice was firm, measured. "We are here to examine allegations of racial profiling and abuse of authority in airport policing." Marcus felt the weight of that sentence settle on his shoulders. The chairwoman turned to him. "Captain Marcus Reed, thank you for appearing voluntarily." "Thank you for having me," Marcus replied. "Please state your name and occupation for the record." "Marcus Elijah Reed," he said. "Commercial airline captain." "Was anything else?" Marcus inhaled. This was the line they had negotiated. The compromise. "And," he added, "a federal officer detailed to the Department of Defense." A ripple moved through the room. Not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakable. The chairwoman's eyebrows lifted slightly. "For clarity, your presence in the cockpit after landing was authorized?" "Yes, ma'am." "By whom?" Marcus hesitated, just enough to be visible. "By the Department of Defense, understanding operational protocols." The chairwoman nodded. "Thank you." She turned to the first panelist. "You may proceed." The questions came steadily. Surgical. "Captain Reed, walk us through what happened at the gate." Marcus did. He described the smell of the jet bridge, the officer's tone, the lack of explanation. He quoted sparingly, choosing his words with care. "I was not informed of any specific allegation," he said. "Only that I was suspicious." "And how did that make you feel?" the panelist asked. Marcus paused. Cameras leaned in. "Small," he said finally. "And very visible at the same time." A murmur passed through the audience. Another panelist leaned forward. "Did you believe your race played a role?" Marcus met her gaze. "I believe my uniform did not protect me from assumptions that have nothing to do with my conduct." Silence followed. Heavy. Respectful. Then it was Hargreaves' turn. He sat where Marcus had been, hands clasped, eyes forward. His attorney guided him gently at first. Training, years of service, commitment to safety. Then the questions sharpened. "Officer Hargreave," the chairwoman said, "what specific behavior triggered your suspicion?" Hargreave cleared his throat. "Unscheduled presence in a restricted area." "After landing?" "Yes." "Did you verify his credentials before detaining him?" Hargreave shifted. "We were in the process." "Did you," the chairwoman repeated, "verify his credentials before placing hands on him?" "No," Hargreave admitted. "Was." The chairwoman let it linger. "Were you aware he was the pilot?" "I saw a uniform," Hargreave said. "But uniforms can be misleading." Marcus felt something twist in his chest. Not anger, not anymore. Something colder. Panelist leaned in. "Did you make that same assumption about other uniformed pilots that day?" Hargreave hesitated. "I don't recall." "You detained no other pilots," the panelist said. "Correct." "Yes. And Captain Reed was the only black pilot on that concourse." Hargreave's jaw tightened. "I don't track race." The panelist nodded slowly. "Yet here we are." The room felt charged now, every word landing with consequence. When Marcus was called back for closing questions, the chairwoman's tone softened. "Captain Reed," she said, "why did you choose to testify?" Marcus looked out at the room, the cameras, the officers, the faces half hidden by press badges. He thought of his mother, of the younger officer who'd looked away, of the next man at the gate. Because silence doesn't protect people like me, he said. It just delays the damage. Hush fell. Afterward, in the hallway, reporters surged forward. Captain Reed, do you feel vindicated? Is this justice? Do you forgive Officer Hargreave? Marcus raised a hand. This isn't about forgiveness, he said. It's about accountability. He walked on. Angela caught up with him near the exit. That went well. Marcus nodded. It went truthfully. Outside, the steps of the building were crowded with press and protesters alike. Signs read "Equal skies" and "Procedure isn't justice." Marcus paused at the top of the steps. For a moment he felt the full weight of it, the exposure, the cost, the irreversible shift. Marcus, Angela said quietly, once the findings are released. I know, he said. There's no going back. She studied him. Any regrets? He thought of the gate. The grip on his arm. The phones held up like shields. No, he said. Only that it took this much to be heard. As he descended the steps, the crowd parted just enough to let him through. Cameras followed. Voices called his name. Marcus kept walking. Because now the truth was out in the open. And whatever came next would have to reckon with it. The findings were released on a Thursday afternoon, buried beneath economic updates and a late-breaking storm system that dominated the headlines. By evening they had broken through anyway. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, laptop open, the official report glowing against the dim light of the room. Procedural failures identified. Racial bias not ruled out. The language was careful, too careful, but the substance was unmistakable. Officer Daniel Hargreave had violated protocol. Training deficiencies were cited. Oversight failures named. No one called it racism outright. They never did. His phone buzzed. Angela. They've recommended disciplinary action, she said. Including suspension without pay. For how long? Marcus asked. Indefinite, pending departmental review. Marcus closed the laptop. That's it. It's not nothing, Angela replied. No, Marcus said. But it's not accountability either. Angela didn't argue. By morning, the airport police department issued its statement. Words like regret and commitment to improvement filled the page. No apology. No acknowledgement of harm. The airline followed an hour later. After careful review, Captain Reed will be reinstated effective immediately. Marcus stared at the email. Reinstated. As if he'd been misplaced. He forwarded it to Angela without comment. At noon, he stood in a hangar he knew by heart, the smell of fuel and metal grounding him in a way nothing else could. Mechanics moved around him, nodding politely, avoiding eye contact. A few smiled. Most didn't know what to say. His first officer approached, hesitant. Good to have you back, Captain. Good to be back, Marcus replied. They walked toward the aircraft together, silence stretching between them. Finally, the first officer spoke. I watched the hearing. Marcus nodded. My wife cried, the man added. Said it shouldn't have taken all that. Marcus didn't trust himself to respond. In the cockpit, he ran his hand along the familiar controls. Everything was where it should be. The checklist calmed him, each item a reminder of order, of cause and effect. Still something felt altered. Not broken. Recalibrated. As passengers boarded, Marcus listened to the ambient noise. Laughter, footsteps, the rustle of bags. He wondered how many recognized him. How many had opinions. The door closed. The jet bridge pulled away. Marcus took a breath. Ladies and gentlemen, he said over the intercom, voice steady. This is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard. The words landed differently now. He felt them settle, heavier, truer. The flight was uneventful. Smooth air. Clear skies. When they landed, the applause was polite, routine. Marcus exhaled as the engines powered down. No officers waited at the gate. That night his phone rang again. Reporter. Captain Reed, she said. Do you feel justice has been served? Marcus considered the question. I feel a door has been opened, he said. Justice takes longer. Another pause. What about Officer Hargreave? Marcus leaned against his balcony railing, city lights stretching out below. I hope he learns, he said. But learning isn't my responsibility. The next day, a quieter story broke. Officer Hargreave resigns amid ongoing review. No press conference. No explanation. Marcus read the headline twice. Resigns. Not fired. Not charged. Angela called an hour later. He's out. Marcus nodded. That was always the most likely outcome. It doesn't sit right, Angela admitted. It rarely does, Marcus replied. That evening, Marcus visited his mother. She hugged him longer than usual, her hands firm on his back. I watched you, she said. You spoke well. I spoke honestly, Marcus replied. She pulled back, studying his face. They didn't break you. No, he said. They tried. She smiled, proud and tired all at once. Later, alone again, Marcus sat with the quiet. The adrenaline of the past weeks had faded, leaving something raw behind. He thought of the officers who would read the report and move on. Of the pilots who would still be stopped. Of the next gate. He opened his laptop and began typing. Not a statement. Not a defense. Proposal. Training reforms. Credential verification requirements. Clear limits on discretionary stops. Independent oversight. He sent it to Angela. An hour later, she replied. This will ruffle feathers. Marcus typed back. The echo of the hearing wasn't loud anymore. It had settled into policy drafts, into memos, into uncomfortable conversations that would never make the news. That was how change usually came. Not as a climax, but as residue. Marcus stood and stepped outside, looking up as another plane crossed the sky. He watched until it vanished. Justice, he knew now, wasn't a moment, was a direction. And he had already turned toward it. The morning Marcus flew again for himself, not for optics, not for reassurance, came quietly. No emails, no calls, no alerts lighting up his phone. Just dawn sliding across the tarmac as he parked his car and stepped out into the cold air. The horizon glowed faint orange, the kind of light pilots trusted. Honest light. It didn't hide things. Inside the terminal, the rhythm was familiar. Shoes squeaked on polished floors. Screens flickered with departures and delays. A custodian nodded as Marcus passed. Someone else didn't. That was fine. He checked in, moved through security without incident, without pause. The scanner beeped. The agent waved him through. Normal. Almost jarring in its simplicity. At the gate, a young man in a pilot's uniform stood reading his phone. He looked up, recognition flashing across his face. Captain Reed, he said quickly, almost nervously. Sir. Marcus smiled. Morning. I just wanted to say, thank you, the man said. For what you did. Marcus considered correcting him. He hadn't done anything heroic. He had endured. He had spoken when silence was easier. But he saw something steadier settle in the young pilot's shoulders just from being acknowledged. You don't owe me anything, Marcus said. Just fly well. The man nodded, relief visible, and stepped aside. In the cockpit, Marcus completed his checks with deliberate calm. Switches, gauges, systems responding exactly as designed. There was comfort in machinery that behaved predictably. Unlike people. The first officer glanced at him. Weather looks good. Clear skies, Marcus replied. As the aircraft lifted off, Marcus felt the familiar easing in his chest, the sense of alignment he always did once the ground fell away. Pure gravity had rules. Pressure had equations. The sky didn't care who you were, but it responded the same to everyone who respected it. Cruising altitude brought quiet. Marcus stared out at the curve of the earth. Clouds stretched like unbroken fields. He thought about the weeks behind him, not with bitterness but with clarity, about how close he had come to shrinking himself just to make it stop. He was glad he hadn't. When they landed, there were no cameras, no officers, just passengers standing, reaching for bags, ready to continue their lives. One woman paused as she passed the cockpit. "Captain," she said softly, "good flight." "Thank you," Marcus replied. It wasn't applause. It wasn't justice. But it mattered. That evening, Marcus sat on his balcony again, city lights blinking on one by one. His phone buzzed. "Angela. The reforms passed committee," she said. "Not all of them, but enough to matter." Marcus smiled faintly. "That's how it starts." "They're asking if you'll consult," she added. He thought about it. About meetings and memos and rooms that smelled like polished wood. About doors opening slowly, reluctantly. "Yes," he said. "On my terms." Angela laughed quietly. "Of course." The call ended. Marcus leaned back, letting the night air cool his skin. Somewhere below, traffic moved steadily. Somewhere above, planes traced invisible paths across the dark. He knew the system hadn't changed overnight. He knew there would be more gates. More hands reaching without cause. More people deciding who belonged where. But he also knew this. Next time the record would be thicker. The silence shorter. The excuses weaker. Marcus stood and looked up at the sky, clear and endless. He had paid a price. He would carry some of it always. But he was still flying. And that, steady, earned, undeniable, was something no one could take from him. The invitation arrived on thick paper, the kind meant to feel permanent. Marcus turned it over once before opening it, as if weight alone could reveal intent. Symposium. Aviation safety, civil liberties, institutional accountability. His name printed cleanly beneath keynote speaker. He set it on the counter and made coffee. The city outside his window was already awake. Sirens threading through traffic, a bus exhaling at the corner. Life unchanged. That was the strange part. Even after everything, the world kept its schedule. At the auditorium, the air buzzed with anticipation. Marcus stood just off stage, listening to the low murmur of the crowd. Angela was somewhere in the front row, he knew. He hadn't asked where. He didn't need to. 2 minutes, a coordinator whispered. Marcus nodded, smoothing the crease from his jacket. He thought of the gate, the hum of fluorescent lights, the way his name had become a headline before it was a human thing again. Then the lights dimmed. He walked out to measured applause, polite, restrained. He waited for it to settle. "I won't be long," Marcus began. "And I won't be abstract." He spoke about procedures and people, about how discretion filled the gaps policy left behind. He talked about how silence traveled faster than truth, and how records, boring, thorough records, were the only antidote. "I didn't come here to be brave," he said. "I came because I was tired of pretending this was rare." A ripple moved through the room. "When something like this happens," Marcus continued, "the question is never just what went wrong. It's who paid for it." He didn't name Officer Hargreave. He didn't need to. When he finished, the applause was different. Less polite, more sustained. He stepped back, heart steady, the way it felt after a clean landing. Backstage, a woman approached him, mid-40s, badge clipped to her blazer. "I oversee training for a regional authority," she said. "We're revising our stop and detain protocols. Would you review them?" Marcus nodded. "Send them." A man followed, younger, nervous. "I'm airport police," he said. "I wanted to say. I watched the hearing. I've been thinking about how I talk. How I decide." Marcus held his gaze. "Keep thinking," he said. "Then change." Outside, the sun had slipped behind a bank of clouds, the light softening. Marcus walked without urgency, the city giving him space without noticing. His phone buzzed. Hargreave filed a grievance. It was denied. Marcus read it once. Then he put the phone away. At the hangar later that evening, he lingered longer than usual. He ran his hand along the fuselage, cool metal grounding him. A mechanic waved from across the floor. "You flying tomorrow?" the man asked. Early, Marcus replied. Clear weather, the mechanic said. Marcus smiled. That's the plan. At home, he opened a drawer and took out the folder he'd started weeks ago. Notes, drafts, policies with margins crowded by his handwriting. He added one more page. Not a manifesto. Checklist. Credential verification first. Explain the stop. Hands last, not first. Document everything. He slid the folder back and closed the drawer. On the balcony, the night settled in layers. Distant laughter, the whine of tires on wet asphalt. Above, a plane crossed the sky, lights blinking in steady rhythm. Marcus watched until it disappeared. He knew there would be days when the old heat returned, when a look or a pause would pull him back to the gate. Trauma didn't dissolve just because policy changed. It lingered. It learned your schedule. But so did resolve. The work ahead wouldn't be clean or quick. It would be incremental, contested, occasionally undone. That was the nature of systems. Slow to move, eager to rest. Marcus stood, shoulders squared, breathing even. A holding pattern wasn't stagnation, he reminded himself. It was a choice. Measured, intentional, until the path ahead cleared. Tomorrow he would fly. Next week he would review drafts. Next month he would speak again. And somewhere, at some gate, someone would be stopped and asked to explain themselves. Marcus intended to make sure the question landed differently. He turned from the railing, lights dimming behind him, the sky open and waiting. The last leg of the day was always the quietest. Marcus preferred it that way. The cabin lights dimmed as the aircraft began its descent, the soft chime signaling passengers to settle in. Outside the cockpit window, the city unfolded in a grid of amber and white, steady and patient, like it had been waiting for him to return. Winds calm, the first officer said. Runways clear. Copy, Marcus replied. He adjusted the controls with practiced ease, muscle memory guiding his hands. Final approach demanded focus. Not tension, not force. Precision. Trust. You didn't fight the aircraft. You guided it home. As the runway lights aligned in the distance, Marcus felt the familiar narrowing of the world. The noise faded. The past weeks, headlines, hearings, closed doors, fell quiet behind him. This was where he belonged. The landing was smooth. Tires kissed asphalt. Reverse thrust engaged. The aircraft slowed, steady and controlled, until it turned off the runway and rolled toward the gate. Applause rippled through the cabin. Brief, instinctive. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. At the gate, he stood as passengers disembarked, offering nods, quiet goodbyes. Most passed without comment. A few met his eyes, something unspoken there. Recognition, perhaps. Or gratitude. Or simply relief. Near the end, a boy lingered, maybe 10 years old, clutching a backpack too big for him. He looked up at Marcus, eyes wide. You're the pilot, the boy asked. I am, Marcus said. The boy hesitated. I wanna fly planes one day. Marcus crouched slightly so they were eye level. Then you should, he said. Study hard. Questions. Don't let anyone tell you where you can't go. The boy nodded solemnly, as if receiving instructions of great importance, then hurried off to catch up with his mother. Marcus straightened, heart unexpectedly full. Later, alone in the cockpit, he sat for a moment before shutting everything down. He rested his hands on his knees and breathed. He thought of the gate again, not with the sting it once carried, but with distance. Perspective. The moment had changed him, but it no longer defined him. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped waiting for closure. It wasn't coming. What came instead were patterns. Policies revised, conversations altered, pauses where there hadn't been any before. Small things. Structural things. The kind that didn't trend. That was enough. In the terminal, Marcus passed a uniformed officer near the exit. The man glanced at him, then nodded, respectful, restrained. No challenge. No curiosity. Just acknowledgement. Marcus returned the nod and kept walking. Outside, the night air was crisp, the sky clear. He paused for a moment beneath the open expanse, the low rumble of departing aircraft echoing overhead. He thought of his mother's kitchen, of Angela's careful strategies, of the young pilot at the gate, standing a little straighter, of the officers who would read new protocols and grumble, and then maybe comply. Change didn't arrive as a verdict. It arrived as habit. Marcus reached his car and placed his bag in the trunk. Before getting in, he looked up once more, watching a plane lift into the dark, lights blinking as it climbed. Final approach wasn't the end of flight. It was the transition. He knew there would be more turbulence ahead. New battles, quieter ones, fought in conference rooms and footnotes. He would show up for those too when it mattered. But tonight he allowed himself this moment. The road home was open. The sky above, wide and unclaimed. Marcus started the engine and drove, steady and sure, carrying with him the knowledge that he had held his course. Not just for himself, but for those still lining up at gates, still trusting the system to see them clearly. He hadn't changed the world, but he had adjusted its heading. And sometimes, that was enough to ensure a safer landing for everyone who followed.